Hey there, government people. So in our last video, we learned a little bit about the Constitution and kind of what's in that document. We're going to delve deeper into one topic that's not explicitly mentioned in the Constitution, but does play a big role in it, and that would be the concept of federalism. It is something that Mr. Brager alluded to in his video. We're going to take a little bit deeper now as we study the government and the Constitution. So let's talk about laws real quick, ladies and gentlemen. So first off, we have federal laws that you have to follow. Federal laws like all men must register for the draft at age 18, and employers got to pay the minimum wage, and you can't be denied a job based off of gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, those kind of things. Those are federal laws that apply to the entire nation. Now, we also have laws that are distinct to the state of Wisconsin. Things like your driver's license, okay? Your Wisconsin driver's license may be unique because people in other states don't have to follow other rules. For example, GDL does not exist in every single state, okay? It's a state by state kind of thing. Drinking age, okay? State by state kind of thing. Yes, every state says you gotta be 21, but that's a whole other story, okay? Firearm ownership. Every age, every requirement, every background check, different in every single state. So there are state laws you must follow as well. Lastly, there are also local laws. Things like when you can and cannot burn your garbage, or how late you can have a party, how noisy your party can be, what side of the road you can park on, what kind of tags your dogs that have, that kind of stuff, all right? You have to follow a variety of laws every single day, some of them federal, some of them state, some of them local. What I'm getting to, ladies and gentlemen, is that this is the idea of federalism, how we divide power between the national government, the state government, and the local government. And this is going to have a variety of looks to it as we go through this short little lecture on this topic, all right? So first off, why these guys who wrote the Constitution, why they divide it this way? First off, these guys were very, very scared of powerful government. They just got out of a government they called a tyranny, a tyrant, an absolutist type government. They thought that, hey, you know what? If that government is too gosh darn powerful, it is a threat to individual liberties. It is a threat to your personal freedoms. So they were trying to find a way to restrain the government, not weaken it, just restrain that power. And the thought was that if you could divide power between the federal, the state, and the local, you're not going to have the opportunity to abuse power like the framers saw during the period before the revolution. So after the revolution is done, we make a government. We have the Articles of Confederation. We have 13 states. Count them. There's like 13 there, I think, okay? And you have one federal government. Under the old way of doing things, the states had a lot more power than the federal government, and the states could do basically whatever they wanted to do. The goal for federalism was to equal that power out. Make sure the federal government's power equaled the state government's power. Not that it was more powerful, just that it equaled everything out. And that was the goal they had. And we'll look at how this is going to look today in the idea of federalism. So really you have this dual system of government. The two basic levels with their own authorities. You have the national, kind of the federal authority, and the state authority. You know, people have to follow those rules all the same time, but there's still two different two different jurisdictions or fields of authority that people have to work in. Great way to describe this. Okay, I'm going to use cake a lot today because I love cake. Cake is good, yummy. Anyway, this idea of the kind of that dual levels of government, think of it as like a layer cake, okay? As you go down the layer cake, you have the federal, you have the state, you have the local. And so there's a clear line between each one. And that's kind of how the theory of federalism is supposed to work. We'll get into the other version of it in a second here, the marble cake version in a second, okay? It does change things up a little bit. But prior to, say, 1937 in our country, things looked a lot like this. There were very, very distinct layers on that layer cake, all right? So in the layers, we had certain powers for certain parts of government, okay? There were certain powers given to the national government. There are certain powers given to the state government. I will probably give you this diagram, okay? I don't worry about copying it down. But certain powers the federal government had, things like coining money, having the army, declaring war. That was a federal government job, whereas the states had jobs like, you know, education and elections and marriage laws, those kind of things. And those were levels of government that they took care of those distinct things. Sometimes they did cross over, right? Both can do things like law and order, like you have state police and the FBI. Those are the concurrent powers that exist. So we're looking at how, in another way, right? It lets local action take at local level, at that bottom level, right? Local stuff, stop signs, noise complaints, those kind of things, all right, are taken care of locally. Big federal things are taken care of on the federal level, like declaring war, that kind of thing, all right? You don't really want the state of Wisconsin declaring war on China, you know what I mean? At the same time, I'm not sure we want the federal government trying to decide what the speed limit should be on Highway 12. And so that's kind of where those lines were drawn. Now, the federal government has what are called delegated powers, okay? Those are powers that are only for the federal government. And there are three kinds. You have your express powers, your implied powers, and your inherent powers. You need to know the difference between these three. It's kind of a big deal, all right? First off, the express powers are the ones that are literally written out in the Constitution. So look at your Constitutions, take a second, pause the video, open it up, right? Got it? Thank you. Okay. In Article 1, Section 8 of that Constitution, there's a list of 27 things, all right, that Congress has the expressed power to do. And only Congress has the expressed power to do these things. Things like declare war, make an army, make taxes, print money, all that kind of stuff are all written in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. Now, funny thing is, Congress had made laws not about those 27 things. And that power comes from the implied power. Implied means that while these powers aren't like listed there in Article 1, Section 8, they're still there, thought to be there by a reasonable person. And it comes from this one line in the Constitution. So in Article 1, Section 8, at the very bottom, Clause 18, there's this line. It says, to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution and foregoing powers and all the powers vested by this Constitution. Essentially, it is a almost kind of like a get out of jail free card for the Congress. If they need to make a law to do their job, they can do it. All right? That's kind of what it says. Anything that is necessary and proper to run the country or to fulfill those other 27 things, they can do it if they need to. Now, sometimes they call it the elastic clause, okay? Think of this as like people's Thanksgiving pants, right? At Thanksgiving, you eat a lot, you wear elastic pants because they stretch. This then allows you to stretch the power of the Constitution and stretch the limits to what Congress has. And so it's called the elastic clause, just like pants on Thanksgiving, okay? Last one are our inherent powers. Really, these powers exist because the United States is a country, all right? To put it simply. If we're a country and we have citizenship, we have to make sure we have power, that Congress to make laws that say who's a citizen, who's not a citizen. That we can worry about immigration and deport people, that we can get territory, protect the country from rebellion, that kind of stuff, right? Those kind of powers are there because we need to run a country, and that's why those inherent powers are there. Now, right now, it's looking kind of like this, right? You have this really big, powerful federal government and little state guys like, I can't do anything, you know what I mean? Kind of like, sitting there, no, help me, whatever, okay? They thought of that, okay? The framers kind of thought of this too, and we're looking to how these state guys actually have power, in some cases have more power on the federal government. Quick review here, make sure you know the government has three kinds of power. The national declares war, they have concurrent powers, three types, so states have certain power, there are powers that share the two concurrent powers, and we have powers that are just for the federal government. The express, implied, inherent, and don't forget that elastic clause that says they can do things that maybe aren't always written down. Now, the states do have certain powers, and they are called reserved powers. Powers that are reserved literally just for the states. There are powers the federal government does not get to, and that comes in the 10th Amendment. Essentially, they wrote in the 10th Amendment that anything that's not written in the Constitution goes to the states. And when they were making the Constitution, the states had to sign off on it, as we learned in class, but the states were worried that the federal government was going to have too much power. And so they asked for that amendment to be like, hey, listen, anything not written in that Constitution goes to the states or to the people. So what kind of laws can states actually do? Honestly, it's just about anything not written in the Constitution. So things like marriage, right? Every state has a different age of legal marriage. Some states it's as low as 16, others it's 18, depends on which state you're in, okay? Sales of like pornography and gambling, that kind of stuff. permits, licenses for teachers, lawyers, doctors, all that kind of stuff. How about public school looks? How many days you gotta go to public school? Graduation requirements, the drinking age, all that kind of stuff is different from state to state to state. Believe it or not, most of the regulations you follow on a day-to-day basis are not federal laws, but instead are state laws. Okay? They're mostly state laws from Wisconsin because they take care of things on this level right here. Big questions come up here. If states make their own rules, why does every single state have a 21-year-old drinking age? When they could be different. They want to. If Wisconsin wanted to be 18, they could. Well, here's what happened, okay? Early on, this is in the late 70s, early 80s, after a rash of drunk driving incidents, there's groups that petitioned the federal government. And the federal government said we should have a higher drinking age. It used to be 18. I'll tell you some fun stories in a little bit, okay? But what ended up going down was that the federal government basically said, listen, if you don't have a 21-year-old drinking age, we're not going to give you any federal highway money. And so all of a sudden, every single state changes their drinking age to 21 from 18 because they want to get those federal benefits. This is where things kind of start changing. We start meshing the two. One of the ways that the federal government controls states' legislatures and state laws is by giving money. So the federal government will give money to the states to do programming. But unless they meet certain requirements, the states don't get that money. And it kind of changes this whole layered dynamic now, if you will. It makes it more like over here, this marble cake, where you have, maybe if the white cake is the federal and the chocolate cake is the state, these start getting more and more intermingled now, okay? Instead of these distinct lines and layers, you have more of these everything kind of mixed up here because now the federal government is influencing how state laws look because of the money and getting involved in those state and local governments. And you start seeing more of this mixing of authority between the different groups. Now, there are certain things states can't do, right? They can't print money. They can't make alliances. So, there'll never be a monetary unit called the SCONY, okay? As cool as that would be. States can't make alliances, all right? We can't go make a treaty with China if we want to, okay? They can't tax the federal government. They've tried, failed, didn't work too well for them, okay? And you can't basically violate any rules of the Constitution. There are some things that overlap, though, between the federal government and the state governments, okay? So things like taxes. I pay state taxes, I pay federal taxes. There are federal courts and state courts. There are certain crimes that are both federal crimes and state crimes, okay? And standards and all that kind of stuff. Police forces. The big question is, when you have a law, right? That's both a state and federal law. Which one do you have to follow? It's going to be the federal law, okay? There is a clause in there. It's called the Supremacy Clause in Article 6 of your Constitution. Take a second and open that puppy up. Got it? Got it? Good. Thank you. Okay. Where it basically says that, in a nutshell, that the Constitution is number one, and all acts of Congress number two, state laws are number three. That yes, that Constitution is the law of the land, and that federal laws that are made are laws that must be followed. And if a state makes the exact same law, the federal law should be followed. So, quick look at this. According to the federal government, marijuana is illegal, right? Go to Colorado. Colorado state legislature passed a law allowing the recreational use of marijuana. Great example, right? If you look at the letter of the law, that act of Congress that said marijuana is illegal should be followed because it's a national federal law versus the state law of Colorado. The federal government honestly just chooses not to enforce that federal law. If they wanted to, they could bust in with a DEA and shut down the entire Colorado pot operation. They just don't, okay? But that federal law has to be followed. Leave you guys again on this little diagram here. Remember, there are national powers, the delegated powers of the national government, there are reserved powers of the state government, and concurrent powers that they share. We can look at this in two ways. You either have the layers of government, right? National problems for national government, state problems for the state government, okay? Layered situations. But it gets a little murky when you have the concurrent powers, okay, which the federal always has supremacy, or when the federal government starts influencing state stuff through money. You get more of that marble cake look, all right? That's it, guys. I'm out of here in 14 minutes and 30 seconds. Make sure you have this done for Tuesday. That way we can talk about federalism some more. Thanks a lot. Have a great day, everybody. Peace.